What's up YouTube? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you everything my Ackies eat, part 2. So to start the video, we're going to talk about the insects that I'm keeping in a normal rotation as feeders for my Ackie monitors. The staples which I'm going to feed on a regular weekly basis, they're going to make up the majority of their diet. So let's start off with the Dubia Roach. Dubia Roaches are a great prey item to offer your Ackie monitor as one of the staples in the animal's diet. The reason being is because Dubia Roaches have a very long intestinal tract like many other roaches do. And what that means is, if you're feeding your Dubia Roaches the right food, you can make them very high in nutrition before you offer them to your Ackie monitor. Dubia Roaches are high in protein, low in fat, and have a decent amount of moisture. But there are some things you want to be careful about when you're offering Dubia Roaches. Dubia Roaches are very high in protein, and if you give your Ackie monitor a high protein item too frequently within the animal's diet without mixing it up, or not giving the animal the proper amount of time to digest the meal completely, it can negatively impact the animal's health. So with Dubia Roaches, you want to make sure you pay attention to not only how many Dubia Roaches you're feeding at a time, but how many you offer during a week and what size Dubia Roaches you're offering. The bigger the Dubia Roach, the older the Dubia Roach, the higher amount of protein the animal's body contains, which means it's going to take more moisture and more heat for that animal to break down that Dubia Roach. Also, it's going to take more time for the animal to completely expel all the waste. I highly suggest that you keep them on a diet of straight vegetation, the majority of that being vegetables, and a small percentage of that being fruits, so that way these guys can absorb all the vitamins and minerals from all the vegetation they're eating, and then you can offer all of that nutrition to your pet. Because Dubia Roaches can be so high in protein, where they can reach levels of above 30%, I like to offer Dubia Roaches during the warmer part of the year, meaning that these insects are offered on a weekly basis as a spring, summertime food, and then I build up my colonies and I feed different prey items during the colder months of the year, because my Ackies are going to have an easier time digesting my Dubia Roaches in the summer. Ambient temperatures in the reptile room and in the rest of the building are warmer. So rather than battling the cold weather that you would find in the Northeast and giving these animals a prey item that might be harder for them to digest, I tend to give them insects that are lower in protein during the colder months. And I save the Dubia Roaches for when it's hotter and more humid within the ambient environment around the animal's enclosure, because even though you might keep your enclosures warm and humid during the winter time, for some reason, especially in the Northeast, those temperatures outside will still affect your animal's digestion and metabolism. The next prey item that I have in a normal rotation for my Ackie monitors are grasshoppers. Grasshoppers have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, percentage of body fat compared to protein that you find on the list. Now, grasshoppers are also not super high in protein. They average at about 20 to 21%. This means that they have a lower risk of giving your animal conditions such as gout from overfeeding. Now, the interesting thing about grasshoppers, which is the main reason why we introduced them as a live feeder in the hobby, is because many studies have shown that one of the biggest prey items that Ackie monitors will take down in the wild are locusts. So with that being said, the most similar thing that you would find in the United States, of course, are going to be grasshoppers. Now, some people think because when you look at a cricket and you look at a grasshopper, that because they look slightly similar, because of course the long jumping legs and the wings, that these insects are within the same family. However, grasshoppers and locusts both belong to Acrididae, whereas crickets are actually in a completely different family. They belong to the family Grillidae. If you want to offer an Ackie monitor a prey item that's similar to what it would be feeding on in the wild, that just goes to show that a grasshopper is going to be a more similar prey item. Not saying that Ackie monitors wouldn't feed on crickets in the wild. Of course, it is a burrowing reptile, which means that more than likely, when it's hiding under rocks and in crevices, it is going to encounter crickets here and there. But based on the stomach contents of Ackies that have been harvested in the wild, it is clear that a larger portion of what these animals are consuming are grasshoppers. And of course, the third insect that I have in my normal rotation for my Ackie monitors are going to be crickets. Now, the thing that I actually like about crickets is crickets tend to be lower in protein and higher in moisture, so they're very easy to digest. If you've ever heard crickets chirping around late August to early September, that's because this is the normal time of their breeding cycle. So of course, if we're mimicking what we're observing in nature, if you ever turned over a rock during the early fall, that's where you're gonna find a lot more crickets as you would find during the summer months. And actually, you'll see a lot more baby crickets under stones and under logs. In other areas of the world, the same thing is happening. So that means that there are higher cricket numbers. And so any animal that preys on crickets at the time is going to prey on crickets more because there's more of an abundance of them in the environment. And since crickets are lower in protein and higher in moisture, they break down and digest much easier than other insects, of course, that we would feed during the warmer months of the year. So during the cooler months, I like to offer crickets more often because they're easier for my Ackies to digest during that time, which makes them safer than feeding higher prey items all year long. Now let's talk about black soldier fly larvae. So black soldier fly larvae are, of course, a treat item that I offer my Ackie monitors every once in a while. I only give these insects maybe about on a monthly to bi-monthly basis. I don't really feed them on a normally weekly schedule. Now, the reason I offer these insects is because of their high moisture content, and they keep my animals hydrated. Now, the cool thing about the black soldier fly larvae is the fact that they are what is considered the healthier alternative to waxworms. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that waxworms don't have a place in an Ackie monitor's diet if you're trying to make the animal gain weight and put weight back on the animal if it has extremely low body fat. However, if you want to offer a treat once in a while to an animal that is normally within a healthy weight, I would consider offering black soldier fly larvae over waxworms for the simple fact that these guys have a slightly higher amount of protein and a lower amount of fat per prey item. Now, of course, when you get black soldier fly larvae in, they're kept on a substrate of sawdust, which means when you get them, they seem very thin, very small. They don't really seem like there's much sustenance to this prey item at all. However, if you were to take black soldier fly larvae and gut load them on some healthy fruit and veggies, they're going to suck up all of that moisture and they're going to plump up quite a bit, where it's going to be easier for your Ackie monitor to not only recognize them as a prey item, but also they'll get excited with the sight of seeing this prey item. So if you're going to feed black soldier fly larvae, I highly suggest, just like all the other insects, to gut load them first, so that way you have a more appealing prey item for your Ackie monitor to consume, and also so you can introduce more moisture. And of course, the last item on the list is the tomato worm, also known as the hornworm, the green worm, the blue worm. The cool thing that I like about hornworms, tomato worms, whatever you want to call them, is the fact that they have an extremely high moisture content. So these insects are really good for hydrating your reptile. If you have a reptile that's dehydrated and you want to get some food into them, these insects are going to be a great prey item to offer. They're also easy to digest because they're very low in protein and very low on fat, so there's really not a lot to process there. Now, of course, that also means that if you're going to offer hornworms, that they're not going to be super high in nutrition because the majority of their body only contains moisture. However, if the goal of feeding these insects is to hydrate their animal, they're going to be very good. Now, what I do when I get in my hornworms, I tend to get them off of that paste that they normally are fed on. And what I do is before I feed them to my reptiles, I give them some nice dark leafy greens. And then, of course, in a natural setting, caterpillars are going to feed on a lot of leaves and a lot of vegetation. So giving them something that's more similar to what they would normally eat in nature makes more sense to me, since we're going to be offering this to our reptiles in captivity. If you have an Ackie monitor or any other reptile that might be going through a winter fast or some sort of brumation, it might be good to make sure that the last few items that the animal consumes are either a hornworm, a black soldier fly larvae, or even a waxworm, because not only will it give the animal a little bit of fat to live off of, but it will also give the animal some excess moisture within its body to make sure it's hydrated throughout that fasting process. And of course, because the majority of insectivore reptiles are going to consume the majority of their moisture through food, it's good to offer these prey items before the animal goes on a fast where it's not eating, because at least you're making sure the animal's hydrated going into that process. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed this video where I showed all the adjustments that I've made to my Ackie monitor's diet. I wanted to make this video for quite a while, especially since I went through all the different adjustments that I made for Thunder when I had to change his diet a few years ago. So I hope this video helps you, and if you guys like my content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Everyone have a great day. Peace.